Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, April 23rd, 2021. Starting with where I left off last week, I finished this book, Jews and Words, by Amos, Oz, and Fania Oz-Salzberger, which I chose for my recent page 112 tag. This is a definite win for me in terms of the page 112 tag, probably the top of the list, because I'm thinking this is probably going to be one of my top books of the year, period. It seems to fit a theme with me, really, in that a book that probes the Jewish Bible and other texts and how to contextualize it, or Jewish practice, or what have you. Those are reaching my top 3 often, or top 4 in terms of favorite books of the year. And it's saying something I'm sure about my tastes as a reader and where I'm gravitating toward. This book was written by a famous Israeli author who died a couple of years ago, and his daughter, who is a historian. They probe such topics as Jewish continuity, women in biblical and related texts, time and timelessness in Judaism, and also naming in Judaism, including the name Judaism and what it means, because it's not a biblical name. It's not what the ancient Israelites would have called themselves. That would be what really they would have referred to themselves as for most of Jewish history, really. This is almost definitely a book that I will be bringing back up to talk about next month for the Maybe Midrash Readathon, which is a readathon that encourages people to read a book of fiction and nonfiction having to do with religion. And I've already picked out those 2 books that I want to read next month, and one in fact has to do with the concept of time that Rabbinic Judaism has set out. So I'll probably be going back to that time and timelessness chapter here. And there's also some themes or a specific thing in here that touches upon something that I think is a major thematic element of the fiction novel that I'm intending to read. But anyway, I will be back to talk about all of that in May once I read the other 2 books, but I'm very excited to see how these books will be in conversation with each other. But even on its own, standing alone, I mean, this book is already in conversation with a lot of Jewish literature, and it hit the spot for me. I really loved it. Next, well, I'm most of the way through this book. This is All My Mother's Lovers by Ilana Massad. This is a Jewish fiction book that came out around a year ago, which I am reading now because my Jewish book club decided to read this for this month. We're meeting on Zoom next week to discuss it. And it's actually been a while since I've been part of my Jewish book club. I've been putting it on the back burner because I have my Mom and Auntie's book club and the BookTube prize and other things that are taking up time and taking up reading time too. So I hadn't been reading for the Jewish book club, but I wanted to read this book anyway, and once we chose it to read, I thought I should just go all in. This is a book about a young millennial 20-something woman in 2017. She's living her own life away from her family. She's quite independent that way. She's very queer and out and sort of into her own cultural identity. But she gets a call from her brother that her mother died in a kind of a freak accident. Well, you know, a shocking accident, something that was not, she wasn't expected to die. But now Ilana has to go home and take care of, you know, the funeral and affairs, and among looking into her mother's will, she sees that her mother had addressed letters to men that she'd never heard of before, and spoiler alert for who these men are, they're her mother's lovers, and Ilana goes on a bit of a road trip to try and find these men and figure out more about her mother's life that she didn't know about, which is especially poignant because Maggie, the main character, and her mother Iris had a fraught relationship, and Maggie felt very misunderstood by her mother. Her mother wasn't necessarily the most supportive mother of a gay daughter, and so to be able to try to forge like some sort of relationship with her mother post-death even, I mean, I could see the impetus of it. I'm liking this book more than I thought I would. I read some early reviews, and Maggie isn't a very well-liked character. She's very brash. She's very sort of in your face, and she's also grieving, and she's in her head, so she's not necessarily on her best behavior anyway. And she has commitment issues, and she's a drug addict, and it's reminding me of a lot of characters that actually my Jewish book club reads about, that they have commitment issues and are into drugs, except the major difference here is that she's gay rather than straight. And who knows, that might be part of the reason I'm going easier on her, but overall, I actually don't find her to be that annoying, because really she's mostly inside her own head. She's not really hurting, she's not really hurting a lot of people, but she's grieving, you know, she's hurting as well. So the fact that, you know, maybe she's not 100% there for her father or her brother, it's kind of a moot point. They're not 100% there for her either, because they're all grieving. And she has made mistakes in her past, most of which she owns up to in her head. I guess I feel for this character. I mean, probably other ways. There's other ways that I'm biased in a way, like, you know, this whole issue of trying to find common ground or peace with your mother when, you know, you and your mother might have disagreements, or, you know, gaps between you in terms of sexuality and other, you know, modes of, you know, identity. That's just something that I think a lot of women can relate to, you know, just trying to bridge that gap or understand this woman, you know. So overall, I'm really enjoying it. I'm impressed by it overall. I feel like in the past, this would have been a book that I definitely would have given 5 stars to, and I'm a little depressed in a way that I'm giving fewer 5 stars to fiction books. Like, you know, my taste is changing or something, and maybe I won't have as much fiction at the top of my top reads list of the year, or blah, 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 and that makes me depressed. But I feel like I can't exactly give this book 5 stars, maybe just because of, you know, some pacing issues, or also just the idea of, I guess I have mixed feelings about how Iris is factoring in, because she does get chapters in this book, and I love them because, you know, they flesh out her character, but it also just takes away from the narrative flow. Like, maybe this should really just be from Maggie's perspective. But in that vein as well, you know, she's on this road trip, and it's like the letters are kind of like a plot device, and the men, such as they are, they like pop in and out as I don't know, maybe NPCs in a game, as it were. If I were to relate this literary fiction novel to like World of Warcraft or something, the men are kind of like NPCs to help her figure out more stuff about her mother, or help the reader figure out more stuff about her mother. So in a way, that's a little bit clunky. And I also have to imagine that when I talk about this book with the book club, that they'll also be slightly more critical. I'm just assuming that we just rarely have a book where everyone's like swooning over the moon about it, although it has been a while since I've done this book club, so who knows. But anyway, that's where I am with it right now. I really am enjoying it overall. I mean, you know, it's not perfect, but, you know, very few things are. But I am finding it very compelling and relatable, and I'm liking it. Next, well, I'm about 80% through this audiobook. I'm not sure if you could see it. This is Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. It is the first novel in the Expanse series, which I have been watching the adaptation of for the past several years and growing more and more obsessed, until finally this year I told myself I'd really be interested in starting the book series at long last. And in fact, I put this book, Leviathan Wakes, as my number 20 on my BookTube spin video that I made a couple of months ago for the BookTube spin, which is going to be happening on April 30th. Rick McDonnell actually made an announcement video just recently for people interested in doing the BookTube spin. He will be doing his spin 2, on April 30th. I made my video way early because I missed the first spin, but I got, like, you know, FOMO or something, and I just wanted to, you know, take part immediately, even though I wouldn't be reading a book for spin 1. I made my spin 2 list way early in advance, and now I have read 2 books on that list. So what's going to happen if Rick spins one of those numbers? I don't know. Book crisis. But anyway, this is kind of a surreal experience, I guess, to read the book that a series I'm so invested in is based off of. And Book one might be the most complicated book for me too, because season one was the most complicated season for me. I gave up on The Expanse of the first season. I just wasn't feeling it and had to go back and sort of relearn everything and rewatch and re-understand. And it took me a while actually to get all the pieces in order, because the book slash series starts with basically this crime mystery thing where there's all of these pieces, and we start by following like the little pieces, like we think we're looking for a missing heiress or something, but really she's involved in something much bigger than all of that, and it takes a while for all of those pieces to come together. And it took me a while to really understand all of the pieces, even as I continued on with the show. I also feel like if I hadn't been watching this show, I might have not given this book the attention it deserves. I might have not been all in for this sort of atmosphere. There's a grittiness to the atmosphere. This is a very working class sort of book in a way, and not only because we're predominantly following the most oppressed cultural group in the belt, but it's about people, working, grimy ship and station jobs, not the upper class echelon at all. This was very intentional. I'm listening actually to a podcast that's hosted by Wes Chatham, who plays one of the characters on the show, and Ty Frank, who is one part of James S.A. Corey. And Frank was talking about his love of the movie Alien and how what drew him in, one of the first things that drew him in was that this wasn't like taking place on a pristine ship, and we weren't like following the captain around or anything. We were following the grunts who, had to do the grimy work. And so that, and other things from Alien, like, the horror and stuff, it really influenced The Expanse. In terms of character, it's been a weird experience for me too. The character who feels the most different to me is Amos, the one that Chatham plays. The way he's presented in the book, he, talks and curses a lot. And I'm listening to it on audiobook, and Jefferson Mays, the narrator, has him speaking in this thuggish mafiosa accent, and that's just throwing me off because it's not how Chatham plays him. And all I can think about, because Chatham plays Amos in such a reserved way, and all I can think about is the show Amos telling book Amos, you talk too much, which is something that show Amos tells a lot of people who talk too much. The character who I think is the most similar in the book and the show is Alex, the pilot. Amos and Alex are part of the same crew together, along with Holden, who is one of our narrators, and Naomi. I guess Alex is just a bit of a character, kind of cowboy wannabe from Mars sort of thing. He's also, in the book, I think especially really a secondary sort of character. I don't know, it's been interesting. There's a lot more tension between Holden and Amos in the show in season one than there is in the book. And there's almost nothing really between him and Alex. Their relationship mostly just seems professional and nothing else. And then with Naomi, it's hard to tell exactly, because most of what Holden is doing with Naomi is basically saying, "Who's that lady? Sexy lady." That's pretty much what's happening. But their relationship, which it does turn romantic, it's also very different, and I prefer the show. There's something that happens in the book, there's a big climactic, horrifying sort of event that shows the horrors that humanity can do to each other. And Holden and Naomi come out of that with the same sort of determined idealism about, this was awful and we need to do something about it. And I feel like that's the place that their relationship really started from in the show. And in the book it's different. It's almost like they're acting on something that they've been doing in the past, because they've been serving on a ship together for a while before the book starts. And it's just, maybe it's more realistic, but it doesn't hit me in the feels as much, I don't know. Anyway, the other major character is Miller, Detective Miller, who is a Belter who lives on Ceres. He is a police detective. He works for a company that basically keeps the peace on Ceres, which is a station owned by Earth. And he's the one who gets the case to look for the missing heiress and ship her back to her daddy, because, she's off slumming it in the belt. And I don't really love this storyline in either, the book or the show. I'm kind of just, dealing with it because I like the story overall. But, the whole idea of, the cynical detective who basically has to create a woman to obsess over in his head. It doesn't do much for me because, it's saying that Julie is that character, but of course she isn't. He's manifesting something onto her to, compensate for something missing in his life. And that's another thing that I think the show did better. I don't know, I'm bad in this way. There's this sense in the show of how distant Miller really feels from his Belter identity and how much of an outsider or a pariah he is among his people that I didn't feel as much in the book. And maybe I should have. Maybe it should have been obvious because here he is, he's a copper who's, policing his own people for Earth. So maybe it should be, Captain Obvious over here. But I just feel like it's much more expressed on the show, and in his relationship with Anderson Dawes, who in the show it feels like he knows who he is. Like, Anderson Dawes is this sort of kingpin mafiosa man who reminded me of the guy from Slumdog Millionaire who Salim, ends up working for. And of course Salim knows who this kingpin is. He runs the neighborhood, and that's how I saw Anderson Dawes. But it seems like in the book that Miller hardly knew or cared who he was, but now I'm just starting to nitpick anyway. When Holden and Miller ultimately come together, I do feel like that's where things get really interesting, and you can really tell the differences between their characters, and you get into big questions about, humanity and how to, approach, these horrible situations that they're finding themselves in. Because the bad guy part of The Expanse really is that an evil corporation decides that, it can do horrible experiments with humans, because why not? And I guess that's most of what I can say here. I'm enjoying the book, and I guess I can't probe too much how much of it is based on my love of the show versus the book, but it's definitely something that I want to keep in on and keep on with the other, the successive books that have come out. I want to listen to them as well. Just as a parting note, oh man, I miss Ava Sarala, the Earth diplomat, who is not a part of book one at all, but of course is in The Expanse and makes the world of The Expanse seem much bigger. Like, she figures out a lot of things that, Holden and Miller have to figure out on their own, which kind of makes them, overly special in a way. Like, they figure out so much stuff. And Eartha, in general, like, just feels so remote because, we don't have any characters, on Earth for this, book. And that's weird too. And the pacing is weird because actually season 1 is only about half of book 1. So everything just feels a little bit weird to me, but the story beats are all there, and I am all in, and I will be finishing it soon. And I have to be finishing things up soon because I got more stuff coming up the docket, with that audiobook. Now suddenly I'm trying to read 12 books in April, so whoa. And then the next one will be this one, Square Haunting, 5 Writers in London Between the Wars by Francesca Wade. This is a book I am reading for the BookTube Prize, where I am officially judging Group C of the Octafinals. And this is a book that traces the lives of 5 interwar British writers who happen to live in the same neighborhood. Maybe not at the same time all the time, but they passed in and out of this one neighborhood. Seems like a unique way to tell a history. But I'm not going to say much more than that here because I am officially judging it and have to stay mum on my thoughts. But if you want to know my preliminary thoughts about my ballot and more information about the BookTube Prize, I will leave links down below. So that about covers it for me now. Like I said, I am now, I guess, trying to read 12 books in April, and for the 23rd, I am less far along on that than I should be, especially when it comes to my goals for the BookTube Prize. I really gotta get into major reading for that. So this will be my last Friday Reads video of the month, and hopefully I will also reel myself in concerning making long and heavily post-production-y videos like I have been doing these past few weeks. And in fact, my next video should be my author's answer video. I do an author's answer video every month where I answer an AuthorTube question put out by J.D. Archer. And those videos usually are only about 5 minutes or so, so let's try to keep it that way, self. In the meantime, meantime, I hope you are all doing well with your reading goals for your prizes, your book clubs, your BookTube spins and other readathons, yada yada yada. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.